Welcome, dear viewers, where we narrate chilling real-life stories sent in by our brave listeners. Each tale is a first-hand account of someone's terrifying encounter with the unknown. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, I want to share a story that has haunted me for years. This isn't something you'd want to hear before bed, so consider yourself warned. This is about a night that changed everything for me and revealed a hidden world I wish I never knew existed. It all started on a gloomy, rainy night. I was driving home from work, exhausted and eager to crash on my couch. The rain was coming down in sheets, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The streets were nearly deserted, which made the sudden screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal all the more jarring. I slammed on my brakes and pulled over, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, and ran toward the wreck. Two cars had collided head-on, their fronts crumpled like soda cans. The smell of gasoline and burnt rubber filled the air. As I got closer, I could see the drivers. One of them was slumped over the wheel, blood trickling down his forehead. The other car's door was open, but the driver was nowhere to be seen. I called 911 and gave them the details, urging them to hurry. As I waited for the emergency services to arrive, I tried to make sense of what had happened. There were no skid marks on the road, no sign that either driver had tried to stop. It was as if they had just driven straight into each other. The next day, the accident was all over the local news. The reporters were talking about it non-stop, and they mentioned that the driver, who was still in the car, had been rushed to the hospital in critical condition. There was no mention of the other driver. The police were asking for any witnesses to come forward. But something about the whole thing felt off to me. I decided to check online to see if anyone else had noticed anything strange. Sure enough, the local forums were buzzing with speculation. Some people were saying it was just a freak accident, while others were convinced there was more to the story. One post caught my eye. Someone claimed to have seen a third person at the scene, a man in a dark coat who had disappeared before the police arrived. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this accident than met the eye. I started digging deeper, following leads on online forums and chatting with other people who had witnessed the crash. Most of them didn't see anything unusual, but a few mentioned seeing the same man in the dark coat. I started to piece together a picture of this mysterious figure. He was tall, with a gaunt face and piercing eyes. Some people had seen him around town before, always lurking in the shadows, never staying in one place for long. The more I learned, the more unsettled I became. Who was this man, and what was his connection to the accident? As days turned into weeks, the police investigation seemed to stall. They had no leads, no suspects, and no idea what had caused the accident. The driver who had been injured in the crash had slipped into a coma, unable to provide any answers. It was as if the whole thing had just been forgotten. I couldn't let it go, though. I kept digging, trying to find anything that might shed light on what had happened. I talked to more witnesses, pored over news reports, and spent hours combing through online forums. But every lead I found seemed to hit a dead end. Just when I was about to give up, I got a message from someone claiming to have information about the accident. They wouldn't say who they were, but they promised to meet me in person and tell me what they knew. I was skeptical, but I couldn't pass up the chance to finally get some answers. We arranged to meet at a diner on the edge of town. I arrived early, my nerves on edge. The diner was nearly empty, just a few people scattered around, nursing cups of coffee. I found a booth in the corner and waited. A few minutes later, a man slid into the seat across from me. He was middle-aged, with a worn face and a look of deep concern in his eyes. He introduced himself as Tom and quickly got to the point. He had been following the case closely and had uncovered something disturbing. Tom explained that he had found evidence suggesting that the accident was no accident at all. It was a hit, orchestrated by someone high up. He had uncovered records of large sums of money being transferred to accounts linked to the injured driver. It seemed that this was just the tip of the iceberg. According to Tom, there was a web of corruption that extended far beyond the accident. Officials were involved, covering up crimes and silencing anyone who got too close to the truth. The man in the dark coat was a key player in this conspiracy, a fixer who handled dirty work for those in power. Tom's revelations left me reeling. I had stumbled onto something much bigger and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. But now that I knew the truth, there was no turning back. I had to find out who was behind this and why. As I delved deeper into the conspiracy, I started to uncover rumors about underground medical experiments. People were disappearing, taken off the streets and used as guinea pigs in horrific tests. There were whispers of organ trafficking and other unspeakable acts. I found a former doctor who had worked in one of these clandestine labs. He was a broken man, haunted by what he had seen and done. He told me about the experiments, how they were trying to push the limits of medical science without any regard for ethics or human life. They were harvesting organs, performing grotesque surgeries, and testing dangerous drugs on unwilling subjects. The doctor's testimony was chilling. He described how the man in the dark coat would bring in new patients, people who had been abducted and drugged. The experiments were conducted in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that had been forgotten by most but was still very much in use. With this new information, I decided to investigate the warehouse. It was a risky move, but I had to see it for myself. I waited until nightfall and made my way to the location the doctor had described. The warehouse was old and crumbling, surrounded by overgrown weeds and broken fences. I found a way in through a side door and crept inside. The place was dark and silent, the air thick with dust and the stench of decay. As I explored, I found rooms filled with medical equipment, cages and tables stained with blood. It was like something out of a nightmare. I took pictures and gathered as much evidence as I could. The more I saw, the more horrified I became. This was where the missing people had been brought, where they had been tortured and killed. I knew I had to get this information to the authorities, but I also knew that I couldn't trust just anyone. The corruption ran too deep. A few days after my visit to the warehouse, I heard that a body had been found. The news reported that it was the man in the dark coat. He had been discovered in a dumpster behind a rundown motel, his body mutilated and missing several organs. It was clear that someone had wanted to send a message. The police were quick to label it a gang-related killing and seemed eager to close the case. But I knew better. This was connected to the conspiracy, a warning to anyone who might dig too deep. The man in the dark coat had known too much, and now he was dead because of it. With the death of the man in the dark coat, I knew that my own life was in danger. I had uncovered too much, and the people behind the conspiracy wouldn't hesitate to silence me if they found out. I had to act quickly and carefully. I compiled all the evidence I had gathered and sent it to a trusted journalist, someone who had a reputation for exposing corruption. I hoped that they would be able to bring the truth to light and hold those responsible accountable. In the meantime, I went into hiding. I couldn't risk staying in one place for too long, constantly looking over my shoulder and changing locations. It was a stressful and terrifying way to live, but it was the only way to stay alive. Despite the evidence I had provided, the investigation into the conspiracy seemed to go nowhere. The authorities made a few arrests, but the key players remained untouched. It was clear that the corruption ran too deep, and too many powerful people were involved. The journalists who had taken on the story did their best to expose the truth, but they faced constant threats and obstacles. It was an uphill battle, and the forces working against them were relentless. As time went on, I had to accept that the killer might never be caught, and justice might never be served. The conspiracy continued to operate in the shadows, causing more suffering. Nightmares about that night and everything that followed still haunt me. It's a heavy burden, knowing the truth and being powerless to stop it.
Thank you for joining me on this spine-chilling journey. If you enjoyed the story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life scary tales. And remember, if you have a terrifying story of your own, send it in. You might hear it in the next video. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Let's keep the nightmares at bay.